Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Right Stuff workshop presented by UTIA Marketing and Communications. I'm Doug Edlund with the office. I'm Assistant Director for Operations, and I help set these things up. April and Kirsten are going to be joining us, and they're going to take these seats because we're doing this from my office, and this is the easiest way to do it, so we're using my computer. I wanted to pass along that the other day I got an email or a thing in the mail from the National Seminars Training, and it's about business grammar and proofreading. And I was saying, this is an incredible value you're getting today for free, because this costs just $199 per person. So this is just an incredible value for your money today. And I just wanted to, if you do want to write a check for $199, please make them payable to April Moore Massengill, Kirsha Rogers, and Doug Edlund, and we'll be happy to take that into consideration. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to April and Kirsha, and they're going to tell you everything they need to know about grammar and proofreading. And I promise you, everything that I send to them, and I've been doing this for 30 years, looks like a Christmas tree when it gets back after they get done editing it, but they always make it look better. So they make it look like I've taken something I say, yes, English is my native language, but they really do make it look better. So they'll be able to help you in any way, in every way possible to make your writing better. So I'm going to turn it over to April and Kirsha, and you guys can go ahead and have a seat.
Thank you, Doug.
You are welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm April Moore Massengill. I'm the editor here at Marketing and Communications.
And I'm Kirsha Rogers, and I'm also an editor.
So this morning, we're just going to go through just a few of the basics of writing and editing. We're going to do what we call a PowerPoint so you can follow along with us. If you hear me screaming for Doug, it's because I'm not very good at this part.
And very quickly, everyone please, except for April and Kirsha, please mute yourselves because we're hearing some feedback noise. Go to share screen. Share your desktop. Hit share screen.
Oh, okay.
Now they should see that. You can just hit slideshow if you want. There you go.
All right. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Today we're going to go through just a few things. Everyone edits, and before you edit, you have to write something. We'll talk a little bit about editing it or regretting it, and then go through a few resources that should be helpful to you. So everyone edits. One of the things that sometimes we see is that folks worry quite a bit about, well, there are people out there who are so well-spoken, write really well, they must not have to edit anything. And that's definitely not true. There's always room for improvement. I joke that even editors need editors. We edit each other's work frequently. But just as a good example of this, some of you may recognize the speech. This is FDR's address to Congress upon the bombing of Pearl Harbor. A pretty famous speech, and we all know the words. This is a date that will live on in infamy. And if you look at this is FDR's actual edits. His original speech had a date which will live on in world history, which certainly when he went back through and reviewed his own work, he made the changes that made this speech so wonderful and so memorable. So just to take from that, don't be afraid to rip apart your own work. Everybody does it. We do it. Presidents do it. World leaders. So you're good. So moving on, if you're going to edit, you need to write something first so that you can edit it. And it's good to sit down and think about your outcome first. So ask yourself, why am I writing? And a good example of this is maybe you have an event coming up with clientele. You want to inform them of the event. Then you need to think about what information is important to my readers. They need to know when it is, where it is, and most of all, how is it going to benefit them? Why should they take part in your program? Why should they read your article? And then think about what you want to accomplish. Not only do you want them to read this, you want them to have an action. So you want, say, your clientele to attend this event and learn about nutrition or learn about forages or any of the other many things we do. So once you have your goals and your audience, you got to think about how this message is going to reach them, because you're going to write things a little bit differently for each output. A news article is probably going to be longer than a simple flyer or a brochure or a newsletter. The average age of your audience is very important. You're probably not going to write to adults the same way you would to a group of kids you want to come to 4-H camp. And just take notice of your language and your terms and your tone and how you use those. And then an even bigger thing, we see this frequently, you need to match the knowledge level of your audience. So if you're working with beginning farmers, they may not have some of the same terms down that some of your producers who've been in the field 20, 30 years have. If you're teaching about nutrition, some of the folks may not know some of the acronyms that you're using. So just be very cognizant that you all are experts, and some folks may not have that level of knowledge that you do. So when you begin writing, here are a few tips for some things we see frequently. Short words have big impact. You know, if you think about it, some of the shortest words you know are the biggest, most impactful ones. If I go out on the street and ask someone what anti-disestablishmentarianism is, they're probably not going to know, but they know love, life, etc. So short words, big impact. The more complex your thoughts are, or the more you're trying to teach someone, the shorter and simpler you want your sentences.
Rome County, this is Linda.
Another thing to help your writing be clear is avoid acronyms. I've joked before, I may not have a job if it weren't for the acronyms, because sometimes it's easy to forget your audience may not be familiar with some of the terms we're very familiar with. If it's widely used, feel free to use it. I think everyone knows what the IRS is, good or bad, we all know. NASA, things of that nature. Another tip is to change up your sentence and paragraph length. We've all read stuff that you get partway through it and it's just very dry, very boring. You start to nod, you start to drop off. But changing up that sentence length and changing up your paragraph length is going to help break up some of that monotony. This is a big one, vary your verbs. You can say he went home, but a clearer picture for your readers is he ran, jogged, walked, drove. So anytime you have a were or just kind of a boring verb, try and think of something else that would go in there that would paint that clearer picture for folks. And then the big thing, if you can't write, which happens to all of us do, I highly recommend just reading something, because reading someone else's writing can help you get in that mindset and help you get in that flow. And one other tip is to pick something, like if you're going to be writing for kids, pick something that's already directed to them and read it, just to help that move along. And then a big one for me too is create false deadlines. So when you're writing, we've all done it. You get up to that last minute, you write it, and then you go, oh goodness, I have no time to look over this, and you hand it in. If you create a false deadline for yourself up front, maybe the day before something is due, that gives your article time to sit, and then you can review it the next day, and you're much more likely to catch any mistakes or be able to look at it and say, I could really improve this part. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsha, who's going to talk about the actual editing part.
Once you have written whatever it is that you've written, I think sometimes we feel like, okay, I'm so glad I got through that. I just want to be done, turn it in, get it printed, whatever. But it's amazing the things that you might find when you go back and actually edit your work. Some of these are very simple, but again, it's amazing what you can find when you go back and really look at what you've written closely. Obviously, you should run a spell check and proof for misspellings, and running a spell check and reading a hard copy or on screen, you will more likely find more things if you do both of those. And sometimes spell check you can't verify or count on it picking up everything. There have been errors. Subject verb agreement is very important, and that means that your noun and your verb are the same tense or the same plural or singular. So the dog run versus the dog runs. And sometimes when we're writing, we kind of gloss over those things. Make sure your pronouns are clear. He, she, they, and we. This is important for your audience knowing who you're talking about. If you switch back and forth, sometimes it can get confusing. And a big one is to check for accuracy of names and quotes. You want to make sure you're talking about the right person, that their names are spelled right, and your quotes are what they have said. Sometimes I will even send the author or the person that I've quoted their quote back to make sure that it is accurate, or to ask them to shorten it, or make it sound a little better. And make sure you put that material in quotation marks. Continuing on, when you're reading and proofing, make sure that you've taken care of sentence fragments, that you have complete sentences, clauses, things like that. Another important one is to make sure that your figures and data, if you have those in your writing, maybe you're writing a report, an extension report, and you need to report activity or any other kind of program data. You want to double check that that's correct. You don't really know who might see this, and you want to make sure that you're putting out the most accurate information possible. Proofing for missing words and duplicate words. It's amazing to me how often I see this, and it's something even I, in editing and proofing work, will sometimes gloss over. So it's really important that you pay close attention to any words that you thought you put in, but you might not have, or maybe you typed them twice.
I've never done that.
I know. And one thing that we do here, and that we edit for, is when you are typing a hyperlink, generally you don't need to include the http://www period. So we usually remove that, and the website works fine without it. You should always test it just to make sure. But it just looks cleaner, and it's something you'll see in other publications. So whenever possible, remove that unnecessary information if you can. And a big one too is there should only be one space after a period, and that rule has changed back and forth depending on the style you're using. But for UTIA publications, we just put one space after a period. And again, it's easy to miss that unless you're proofing carefully. One tip that I have not really tried until recently, but I know April has, is, believe it or not, reading your text backward will really help you slow down and catch missing words or extra spaces, things like that. And it takes some getting used to, but it really can be beneficial because it forces you to slow down and look at each word and the way your sentence is written. Write once, edit twice. One thing that really helps for me, and I think other editors I would go out on a limb and say, is proof twice or even 3 times. So first, read your content and make sure that you've done all the things that April said before, using the best words, small words, all of those things. And make sure all of that is down and that you like it and that it sounds good. And then go back and look for things like style. If you're using a particular style guide, there may be rules about hyphens, things like that. You want to check that all of that material is consistent. That's a big thing, to make sure things are consistent. Check your page numbering, make sure all pages are numbered, the numbers are in the right place. Your headings, make sure whether you've used all capital letters for your headings or just the first word capitalized. All those things you might not notice, and they may not stand out to you, but they might to a reader. And it just makes it look more polished. It makes sense if you've got all of those things checked off. And then sometimes I'll go back and read again for the content, and 2 or 3 times if I have time, because it's amazing the things that you will find. Having someone else proof your work, as April said, editors have other editors proof their work is big. They, someone, if you have time, get to review your work, and they may have questions. They may see things that you don't see. It's really important, if you have time, to let someone else look at what you've written. Things may not make sense. And a big one is to sleep on it if you can. Write your work, proof it, edit it, whatever you need to do, and then come back to it. Leave it alone and come back to it. And this can be really important, because this happens to me all the time. I will edit something, and then the next day or a few days later, if I have time, I'll go back and I will almost always see something that I missed, whether it's a duplicate word or a misspelling, something like that. And you may also show it to someone to read it, and then get them to read it again if you go back and make changes. So if you have time for all of these things, it just really helps you make less mistakes and have your work polished and ready to put out for the public to see. And it just reflects well on all of us in UTIA as a whole. So those are our basic tips for editing and proofing. And we've got some great resources that you might want to consult.
The first one is our UTIA style guide, and that's located on our website. And that style guide is helpful for names of things, and it helps where other style guides may conflict. We default to this one because here we use both the Chicago Manual of Style and we use the Associated Press Style Guide. The Associated Press Style Guide, which you see at the bottom of this list, is only for news releases and our extension publications. Everything else defaults to Chicago. And the UTIA Style Guide pulls those both together. And the Purdue OWL is a wonderful, wonderful grammar resource. It covers almost anything you can think of. It's a searchable format. We both use it frequently. The Hemingway app is a newer resource, and it's kind of neat because you can take your copy out of your Word document and paste it directly into this app. It sounds like it's an app you have to download. You don't. You can just go to the website, paste your text in, and it will tell you the grade level of what you're writing. It will highlight which sentences are harder to understand, so that if you're trying to write to a lower grade level with certain audiences, you can immediately see that and work to fix it. Grammarly is very similar to Hemingway. Kirsha, you've used it more frequently, haven't you?
Yes, there are lots of great tips.
And then, of course, Chicago Manual of Style and Associated Press Style Guide, which I mentioned. Chicago Manual of Style you can get to on most UT computers without a subscription. The AP Style Guide requires a subscription, but I've linked to their FAQs because those are the things that people ask about most often anyway, and you probably wouldn't use the resource beyond that. I think that's it. Do you have any questions for us? We promise we won't break out any red pens.
My question is there any way that I can print off this, especially the last page with the resources? Is there any way that I can print that off?
I think Doug's going to send out a link.
We're going to send out a link in a little bit. This is being recorded, so
Okay.
you'll be able to get that resource there. You could just freeze the video at that point and print the screen if you'd like.
Okay. That's awesome, guys. I appreciate this.
Thank you. This is fun. We're glad y'all showed up. It was great because editors kind of have a bad rap of being boring, and we're actually really fun people. we're not out with Sharpie markers to get everybody.
You're fine.
And if you have a certain type of publication that you normally write and you need, help or suggestions or whatever for how to write them, just let us know.
I mainly do just art. I work for Extension. I mainly do articles for the newspaper, so sometimes I just like to get a different perspective on it and stuff.
And if it's helpful, I mean, in addition to being recorded, if you want to send me an email at deadland@tennessee.edu. I can just send you the link to this. I can just send you the PowerPoint,
Okay.
and then you can have that as well. Unless April recures you, unless you copyrighted it or something.
You know, we'll have to up that
For that
fee.
$1.99 fee.
There actually is one error, and I started to point this out while we were going through, that I need to fix. I didn't proof one more time like I should have.
We were going to give away a prize to anyone who found it, but no, we're gracious enough. Is there anything else we can help with?
Well, I just want you all to think of us as a resource for anything that, normally we don't always edit things that come from the counties, but if you have questions, I think it's send them to any one of us and we can help at least point you in the right direction or help get you the information that you would need.
Okay.
So please think of this office as a resource and a place that you can come to with questions, because we're always happy to help in any way that we can.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question. My name is Sandra Bush, and you said that tips on proofreading, proof editing was to read your text backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give me an example of that?
So what I do, Sandra, is I actually start at the very last word, and I'll just go word by word and look at the words mostly to make sure they're spelled correctly. Because once you're reading forward in your head, you're also hearing kind of how it sounds, and you may gloss over if a word's been doubled or if a letter's been dropped. Which, like Kirsha was saying, spell check won't catch all of that. I actually saw an error yesterday that was supposed to be this, and it was his. That T had dropped, but spell check wouldn't catch it because it's a word. So going backward like that, it actually forces your eyes to really look at the letters.
Okay, thank you.
And another tip, if you're working on a mobile device like an iPad or something like that, and autocorrect kicks in.
Oh.
And you guys familiar with that site, Damn You Autocorrect?
Oh.
It can change things, and you don't even realize that you've changed something in your text until it's too late sometimes. So that's another good point of just reading it backwards. I mean, I didn't even think of that. That's a good idea.
And I'll be really honest, I've gone as far as to read it backward and turn the paper upside down. Just because I read so much,
Yeah.
I've got to slow myself down in some way. And when you're reading your own stuff, you really become a little desensitized to it too.
Mm-hmm.
So that going from the last word first will help you catch any of those double spaces, etc. I did think of another tip, Kirsha, while you were talking. This was something I learned really early in my career. If anyone is printing a phone number on anything, it's always a great idea just to pick up the phone and call the number you have printed on the piece of paper.
That's a good point.
A good example is I had a friend who was ordering some ink pens for her organization, and she ordered, I think, 25,000 of them with the phone number on it. And she was pretty stressed that day and flipped 2 numbers, and they got a very angry call from someone wanting to know why they were getting so many calls to their home phone. And then they had to destroy 25,000 pens. So, just a heads up, it's better to annoy somebody at that number and call it than to throw away 25,000 ink pens.
Yeah.
There are definitely folks at the Institute who have gotten a 2-minute call from me just saying, hey, sorry to bother you, just wanted to make sure I had the number down correctly. I'm not sure what they think of me now, but their stuff is correct.
Wow.
And especially at the university and other places where budgets are really tight, that can be such a costly error.
And I was going to say one of the biggest tips, and as this off-camera voice was that you talked about having somebody else take a look at it. And I think that's really important to have somebody do, because I mainly work in video production, but when we put graphics in, or we put what we call supers or lower thirds, any text elements in it, you look at it so much that I will not catch a typo or a misspelling. because there isn't autocorrect in our software that we use for our supers. And I have to have somebody look at it because I won't even catch it. I've worked on it so much and I've looked at it so much that I don't even see that error. And sometimes coming from university when you have a misspelling, that's a little embarrassing, but especially if you misspell agriculture or typos in agriculture, somebody's going to let you know about that really fast. So, it's always a nice idea to have another set of eyes. Just look at it. Yeah.
I can't
catch
tell
stuff.
you. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to Kirsch's office and said, "I'm sending out a publication notice to all extension. Could you please check this?" I don't want a typo from an editor going out to all of extension.
Yes. But you know,
Forgive me.
one thing that I have done that has worked for me is I read it out loud, and it really helps. I let my secretary hear me read it out loud, and it just really, wherever the kinks are, it comes out, and that's probably been the best thing for me.
That's a great idea.
Right. That reminds me too, one of the things we've done before, I worked with a dean's list that had a lot of names, and we actually sat down and one of us would hold the list and the other one would spell out the names in the article, the person holding the list. So that's
Right.
yeah. That's great that y'all have the system where you can read out loud to each other.
Yes.
So helpful.
One thing I've done in the past is if I'm trying to do something on screen is just print it out. It's sometimes easier for our eyes to see things or for us to process a little differently on paper. And that's just, I mean, it's obvious, but sometimes we forget. Just print it.
That is a great tip as well.
Yeah, sometimes I know with my eye, seeing it on a page, I see it differently than I see it on the screen, even though it's the same on everything. But there's just something about holding a paper copy. It's different.
So the resources that you had recommended, both the Grammarly and the Hemingway, Grammarly has an upgrade version that they charge for, and then I was looking at the Hemingway, it looks like they also charge. Do you know if OIT or UT offers any free services for that?
I haven't looked into the paid services just because I've been using the free on both of them. That's certainly something that we could check into.
Is it Grammarly? I follow them on Facebook, and they have some really, every now and then, some really good tips. Just short things.
And even with the subscription-based services, if there's enough, requests from, extension offices, faculty, staff, to, we'd like to have this service, occasionally OIT can then make some kind of either a very reduced cost or be able to supply it for free, kind of like they did with lynda.com. So if there's enough demand out there, OIT can then approach those vendors and possibly say, could we get this free or reduced? So if you feel strongly about that, yeah, contact OIT, and they'll thank us later for telling you to do that. But yeah.
That does have more of an impact, though.
Yeah. Just don't tell them who told you to do this.
But Doug, you mentioned Lynda. That's another good point.
Yeah.
Lynda.com has some proofreading and writing and definitely some stuff to help with more advanced features of Word even.
Yeah.
So, I've used it for several things.
Anything else?
Y'all have been great. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel free to contact us.
Thank you. Thank you again for taking a little bit of time out of your mornings. This is a little awkward way of changing things around, but it's a little tight in here. So again, just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email any of us here in Marketing and Communications, because we want to be your resource to help you do your jobs as well. So with that being said, I am going to end the meeting. Unless anyone else has any other questions for April or Kirsha.
Last call for
Last call, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us this morning. And this is going to be uploaded to YouTube, and you will be able to watch it from there too. I will ask Brandy to send out a link to the recording if you'd like to go back and take a look at this. And also, if you have any, again, would like the presentation and have us send it to you, dedlund@tennessee.edu. dedlund@tennessee.edu.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you all very much, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.